Students, welcome to the massive open online course on international economics. In today's module, we will discuss a completely new thing, and the module number is 21. If you look at the slide here, this is New Trade Theory 1. The moment I say that this is New Trade Theory 1, it is apparent that there should be another thing which is not New Trade Theory 1. And in our case, we will have New Trade Theory 2. That is going to be module number 22. So these two modules, 21 and 22, these two modules are going to take care of new trade theories. The moment I say that these two modules are going to discuss about new trade theories, then this naturally indicates that so far what we did in our previous modules, that are not new trade theories. If those are not new trade theories, then what are those? Those are old trade theories, or very old trade theories, or some relatively new trade theories. And one more thing I want to add at the very beginning, that now these days we are having a kind of advancement over this new trade theory. This is called new trade theory. And maybe after some years, it is also possible that we will have new trade theories. So let us briefly touch upon those old trade theories, and then we will gradually move to the new trade theories. So before that, what is the structure of today's lecture? So in today's lecture, first of all, I will gradually get a transition from old trade theories to the new trade theories. And then we'll touch upon the inter-industry trade and intra-industry trade. In fact, all the old trade theories come under this inter-industry trade. I will explain very briefly that. And then economies of scale. What is the overview of economies of scale and trade, and then economies of scale and the market structure. And then the important part, the gradual transition, is that what are the sources of these economies of scale? Now, economies of scale could be external, this could be internal. So in case of external economies of scale, what could be the outcome? In case of internal economies of scale, what could be the outcome? That we are going to discuss not only in this module. These two modules will cover the whole things, the entire description of the new trade theories. But of course, the next module will be more mathematical in nature. So the foundation of that new trade theory, fundamental new trade theory, will be built in this module, and we will actually develop the structure where this new trade theory will be built on, and then we will look at how to measure the intra-industry trade. A very simple index is constructed by some economists, and I will mention about that index and will explain how this is going to be used to measure the intra-industry trade. So as I mentioned in my previous modules and in the beginning of this lecture today, that previously we talked about some theories, starting with Adam Smith's absolute cost advantage theory, and then we moved to Ricardian comparative cost advantage theory, and then we moved to technology and factor endowment based Heckscher-Ohlin theory. And in doing so, we also talked about another theory which is called specific factor model of international trade. So all these are, in fact, Adam Smith's theory is very old theory, and then Ricardo's theory is old theory, and then Heckscher-Ohlin theory is sort of neoclassical theory, and relatively a modern theory is Heckscher-Ohlin 1 and the specific factor model, but not the new one. The new trade theory comes after that. And the new trade theory comes with some very interesting dimension in our demand pattern and international trade pattern. Don't worry, I will discuss those issues. So let us start with understanding the difference between trade in heterogeneous goods and the homogeneous goods. So if we carefully look at Adam Smith, Ricardo, Heckscher-Ohlin and specific factor model, then it would be very prudent to argue that while discussing the trade pattern, I mentioned about that if one country produces and exports X, then the other country must not produce and export X. So the other country would be producing any good except X. So the trading goods are completely different. So the trading goods are heterogeneous. So trading goods are not homogeneous. So similar goods are not being traded. So if dissimilar goods are traded, this is called heterogeneous trade. And heterogeneous trade is discussed in Ricardo, in Hexarolin, in Specific Factor, or in Adam Smith. But is it possible that this trade could be homogeneous in nature? Yes, this is possible. If this is a homogeneous goods trade, then the old trade theories are incapable of explaining that pattern of trade. So what kind of trade theory we need? We need a new trade theory, which is completely different from all those old trade theories. So new trade theory attempts to discuss the trade in homogeneous good. And let me give you an example, very brief and short example. Previously what we said, if I export car, then I am not going to import car because car is the commodity that I can produce most efficiently. So if I export car, then maybe I'm importing computer. But homogeneous goods trade says that this is very much possible that I export car, I also import car. Now look at your life. Look at what is happening around you. You will find it amazing that it is true. India is exporting Maruti Suzuki car. India is importing BMW car. So this is the same good. Means the car industry is having both export and import. The point is that whether I am a net exporter or net importer. I'll come to that issue later on, but this is the idea that good, same good or similar goods are being traded because you have comparative advantage or efficiency in producing one brand and the other countries may have advantage in producing another brand. Or you may be efficient in producing low quality car or low priced car. The other countries could be efficient in producing high quality or high priced car. But in one country, you may have middle class people, poor people and rich people. If the rich people wants to buy BMW car, you cannot deny it. So allow them to buy the BMW car from some other countries, and also you allow, the middle class people or poor people like us to buy lowly priced car, say, of any brand that is produced here in India. So this is basically the idea of homogeneous goods trade, and that we have another name that I'll come to that issue here in this slide. So one thing is that when I export X and I import Y, this is kind of, inter-industry trade. The trade is taking place between two industries, X industry and Y industry. But in case of car, this trade is taking place like intra-industry. Intra-industry means within the industry we are trading. So in homogeneous goods trade, this trade is called intra-industry trade. Say X and Y are two goods. And now these two goods are slightly differentiated, like the example that I gave just a couple of minutes ago. These two goods are slightly differentiated, just like, think of the example of toothpaste. You have, say, Colgate gel. You may have Cibaca, you may have Binaca, you may have Close-Up. But all these toothpastes are very close substitute. But they are substitutes, but they are not identical. So essentially, we can do a little bit of substitution always. So I can export Colgate, but at the same time, I can import Close-Up. So this is the toothpaste industry. Within that industry, this intra-industry trade is taking place. So just like that, in case we can assume that X and Y, so this trade is taking place within the X industry or within the Y industry. So the intra-industry trade takes place because of the fact that the goods considered here, per se, you can say this, the slightly differentiated. So slightly differentiated product gives you intra-industry trade, and when the goods are not substitutable, completely differentiated, we have inter-industry trade. And one more thing I want to mention here, that the more the nations are similar in technology and factor endowments, the more important is intra-industry trade. It becomes relative to inter-industry trade. Why it is the case? Because when the technologies are different, factor endowments are different, the kind of trade that we have that are explained by using Ricardian model and Heckscher-Ohlin model. But when they are similar, the technologies are same, endowments are same, Heckscher-Ohlin model and Ricardian model are not capable of explaining the trade that we have experienced in reality. So that is why we had to have a new kind of trade theory which was developed by a very renowned, very popular economist whose name is Paul Krugman. If needed, I will tell a bit about Paul Krugman later on. Now, what is the factor that essentially determines this kind of trade? The main issue is returns to scale or economies of scale, to be very precise. In Ricardo and Heckscher-Ohlin model, these two models assume that we have constant returns to scale. But there are some industries which are characterized by increasing returns to scale. Now here, if you look at the table, this table says what? On the left panel on the first column says you that the output level of output 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 and 40. And this is the total labor input. When I am saying that it is the total labor input, I presume that labor is the only factor of production. Now here, if you look at this row, 20 units of output of the shirt is being produced by 25 units of labor. Now if it is a case of constant returns to scale means if you want to double the output, you need to double the input requirement. So if we want to produce 40 units of output, we need to double the input requirement, means from 25 to 50. But if you look at this table, what I have here, in order to produce 40 units of output, the total labor input requirement is 45. This means my input requirement is not doubled. So what is the implication of that? The more you produce, your per unit labor requirement is less and it is going down. So the more you produce, your cost of production should fall. Means your labor productivity in a sense is increasing. Since your labor productivity is increasing, it may be, more efficient use of labor is being taking place, and that is why your average productivity is increasing. And if average productivity goes up, then the average cost must fall. So the more you produce, your average cost falls. If your average cost falls, then the price should go down. So that is basically the idea of economies of scale. Scale expansion is leading to a reduction in the price of the product. So now let's say there are two countries, home and foreign, and they both have same technology to produce shirt. Now suppose in Turkey, each country produces 10 shirts, both home and foreign are producing same amount of output. So according to our table in the previous one, let me very quickly go back so that you can relate this thing. So it requires 15 laborers to produce them. If you look at this thing, 15 laborers can produce 10 shirts. Now therefore total world production is 20 shirts, which requires 30 laborers to produce them, because I have both home and foreign. Both home and foreign are producing 10 shirts at home and 10 shirts at foreign, and 10 shirts production requires 50 units of labor at home and 50 units of labor at foreign. Total labor requirement is 30. So when both the countries are producing together 30 units of output, 15 being taking place in home and 15 at foreign. Students, listen to me very carefully. So what is the idea? 10 shirts here and 10 shirts at foreign. 15 labor are employed here and 15 labor at foreign. So 30 laborers are used to produce 20 shirts. Now I have another option. If I decide to produce 20 shirts that I am now producing, 10 here and 10 abroad. Now if the entire 20 shirts are produced at a single country, say at home, then what is going to happen? Look at the slide. So 20 units of shirt requirement is 25 laborers. So students, what I said is that if you produce 10 shirts here and 10 shirts there, total labor requirement is 30. Now instead of that, in spite of that, if you produce all the 20 units of shirt in one country, total labor requirement is 25. So this means 5 labors are saved. If 5 labors are saved, then by using this 5 labor, you can produce more shirt. Means that your output or shirt production for the economy as a whole is going up or increasing. That's the beauty of economies of scale. Scale expansion requires average cost to go down. Average cost to go down means you are saving some resources and you can use that resources to produce more of a commodity. So this is basically the driving force of new trade theory. But this new trade theory, this economies of scale, it may be because of, it may be 2 types, but the 2 types I'll explain. Not I'm going to explain the whole thing, but I will explain that part which is going to be used for new trade theory. So this economies of scale, students, I'm pretty sure that one could be external economies of scale and one could be internal economies of scale. External economies of scale means because of agglomeration, you may have some benefit in the production, and internal economies of scale, this benefit or economies is not coming from outside, rather it is coming from within. You are producing more, so you are getting the benefit. And the external economies of scale means there are some other factors around the industry, kind of ancillary industries are growing up, and that is why you are benefiting. So this external economies could be because of 3 things. One is specialized suppliers, labor market pooling, and knowledge spillover. So you can check any standard microeconomics book, and I'm sure that you would be able to understand. But that is not my focus here. But I wanted to differentiate between external economies of scale and internal economies of scale. Now, before I move to deeper analysis of economies of scale and output and price, let me explain a little bit of other things. Then I will try to relate the economies of scale, output and prices. Students, now look at the diagram here. In this diagram, I have 2 figures. One is for China, the other is for United States of America. The leftmost panel is for China, and then it is the America. So let us discuss the autarky case first, and then we will, in our next diagram, we will try to discuss what is going to happen if these 2 countries are opened up for trade. So here the demand curve is downward sloping and the supply curve is, this upward sloping one. But here we have presence of economies of scale. This negatively sloping demand curve and the positively sloping supply curve is a traditional one. So the demand curve here is also negatively sloping, but if you can recall the construction of the supply curve, that comes from the marginal cost curve, and the marginal cost curve takes like this kind of shape. It goes down, reaches the minimum, and then goes up. So the moment marginal cost curve goes down, average cost curve is also going down. So once I have calculating this average cost curve, then I can move to the marginal cost curve. And as you know, this marginal cost curve means, that is a kind of reflection of the supply curve. So your average cost curve is also going to give you a kind of impression about the supply curve or the supply price or the cost at which the goods are being produced. So since here the average cost curve for both China and USA are negatively sloping or declining, my supply curve is also falling, means falling average cost curve as output rises. This is what I was discussing while explaining the economies of scale. So now in this figure, the equilibrium occurs at the point of intersection between demand and the negatively sloping average cost curve. Here is for China and here is for USA. Now students will look at the diagram. In this diagram, the China here, it is P China and it is P USA. Naturally, from these 2 diagrams, we can see that the price of the product in United States of America is higher than the price in China. So this is the product is button. So button price is low in China, button price is high in USA. Now, what if we go for world demand? Means the demand curve for both these countries are taking together. So This line, students, you look at this line very carefully. This line is for China and this line is not for America. Rather, this line is a sum of China's demand and America's demand. Now, students, if you look at the old diagram, so these two diagrams are giving you the demand curves. You add them together, you get this demand curve. And here you know the more you produce, your average cost will fall. Now let's go back to the diagram here. The more you produce, because here is your demand, so you need to produce more. The more you produce, your average cost gradually falls from left to right. So initially, when it was only China's demand, the price P1 was equal to P China. Now, when the world demand is no longer this one, rather this one, your equilibrium takes place at this point, and this provides you with the price P2. And the world demand is satisfied here at Q2, means the equilibrium price for the commodity is going down. So the point of interest is that price at USA was much higher, China's price was low. Since China has some advantage, China can produce or supply the entire market. The moment China starts supplying for the entire market, the price goes down further. So that's a beautiful thing. The more you produce, the consumers are going to be benefited because the price is low. In fact, if the price is low, the market size expands more because we know the law of demand. Price goes down, demand increases, because now you can have more customers who were not previously able to buy the commodity. Now they can afford the commodity. The more is the market size, the average cost of production will go down further. The market size expands further and the average cost goes down further. Then price will fall and fall and fall. So that's a beautiful implication of economies of scale and its implication for equilibrium price. So now, this economies of scale may have, because of these two things, difference in technology and resources, or it could be historical reasons. But apart from that, the main point in all the trade theories, what we had discussed so far, that we tried to connect all the trade theories, pattern of trade, basis of trade, with the welfare implication. Now, is it possible that because of this kind of trade, we may have an increase in welfare? If it is, then what is going to happen? If it is not, then what will happen? But surprisingly here in this diagram, what you may see, that is not very usual. Now, trade based on external economies may leave a country worse off. This is a possibility. So as a whole, the world may gain, but it is also possible that compared to pre-trade situation, now I am forced to buy the commodity at a relatively higher price. Why it is happening? Look at the diagram. So I have average cost curve for these two countries. One is Thailand, the other is Switzerland. So, say, the Switzerland is very, famous for producing watches, wristwatches. So, Switzerland's average cost curve to produce the product is like this one, and the world demand curve for the watch is this. So the equilibrium when the product is purchased from Switzerland is P1. Now the question is whether Thailand can enter into the market or not. If you look at the average cost curve of the Thailand, the average cost curve of the Thailand starts from a point C0. Students, I am not guaranteeing that it is always true, but this is one possibility. If for some reason C0 just lies above P1, means that the Thailand company cannot start producing the watch. Why? Because Thailand has to incur a cost C0 which is higher than P1. So if I can buy the watch from Switzerland at a price P1, then why should I buy this watch from Thailand company? So Thailand company cannot enter into the market. Now think the situation that if the Thailand company was allowed not to go for trade, so there is no trade. So Swiss watch is not allowed to come to the Thailand market. Then Thailand's equilibrium price could have been somewhere at P2. Why? Because this is the demand curve for Thailand and this is the average cost curve for Thailand. So this is the supply curve of Thailand. So this demand and supply are equating at price P2 and indicating me the equilibrium at 2. So if you allow the Thailand company to produce watch, your equilibrium price would be P2. But for that purpose, you need to allow them to produce. So at the beginning, it may be possible that Thailand company is producing at price C0, but please allow them to produce because they may emerge as the gainer in the market if they can charge a price P2. But the point is that since you cannot do that, you are actually having C0 price and Swiss company is selling their watches at price P1. So you have two options. You could have purchased the commodity at price P2, but instead of that, you are purchasing the commodity at price P1. So what is happening? This economies of scale of the presence of this actually leaving this country worse off. So the point that I wanted to make here is that if there were no trade, then the price in Thailand would actually be lower. No trade means autarkic. Autarkic means domestic demand and the domestic supply for the Thailand. It could have been P2 than what it is in the post-trade scenario. Post-trade scenario means Swiss company is supplying for the entire world and the equilibrium is taking place at price 1. So giving me price P1. So this is how we have this kind of thing. But another implication before I move to my new trade theory 2 in our next module, I want to mention few small things, but these are very interesting. This inter-regional trade or, this intra-industry trade are some way related because it is very much possible that one car industry or car company is producing car at say, Gujarat, the other car company is producing car, say at UP, Uttar Pradesh or Uttarakhand. So these two trade between Gujarat and Uttarakhand may take place, and that may lead to kind of inter-regional trade that we often observe in India between Hyderabad and Bangalore. You may have a lot of programmers sitting in Bangalore and a lot of mechanics sitting in Hyderabad, and they are complementing with each other. So this kind of geographical distribution or allocation is also possible. So this kind of inter-regional trade, intra-industry trade, often leads to or indicates the kind of thing that the more you produce, the more you develop, the cost of production is going to go down. So there could be kind of agglomeration. So this is precisely why you have capital city in every state or in our country. So once this place is developed, this place is going to develop more because the more the laborers will come, the more is going to be produced here, the average cost will fall, the price will fall, and the more customers will come and the size will expand. So once you have a developed center, this is called central business district, and the stream of economics that deals with this thing is called urban economics. So this kind of economies of scale and urban economics are intertwined with each other, and in fact the recent saga of global value chain and the outsourcing, these are also associated with this kind of phenomenon like this intra-industry, inter-regional trade and the geographic location. Now remember, very quickly, I promised at the very beginning that I will touch upon on the index of intra-industry trade. The index is like this, students. You look at the index, I'm explaining what is what. So this T is the measure of intra-industry index. It is 1 minus modulus of x minus m divided by x plus m. So what is the idea? The idea is that if I export a commodity, that is defined by x. If I import the same commodity, that is defined by m. Say I'm exporting car and I'm also importing car. So if I export car and if I import car of same amounts, 100 cars are exported, 100 cars are imported. So what is happening here? X is exported, m is imported. So 100 is exported, 100 is imported. So x minus m is 0. If that is the case, then what is going to happen? It is x plus m is full. So then 0 by something is 0. So 1 minus 0 is 1. So if entire trade is intra-industry, then the value of this index is going to be 1. And on the other hand, if nothing is intra-industry, means you are exporting X of 100 cars and you are importing X of 100 cars, means 0 cars, because it is inter-industry trade. You are not importing cars. So it is X, and here in the denominator, your export is 100 and M is 0. So it is 100 by 100, means 1. It is 1 minus 1 is 0. So if T is 0, entire trade is inter-industry, car exporting and no car importing. If it is 1, entire trade is intra-industry, car exporting and car importing. Now, in between these two, you may have intra-industry a little bit of and a little bit of also inter and intra-industry trade. So, what are the significance of intra-industry trade? This type of trade arises to take advantage of economies of scale in production. Firms in countries are forced to specialize in few varieties rather than different varieties. Firms do this to keep unit cost very low, and other varieties are imported from another country, and the consumer gains because of wider choice of varieties available to them at a lower price. Students, I request you to remember this choice of varieties, because my next module will start from that thing, that the consumers have a love for variety. So students, thank you very much.